Welcome to Aquarian Diary, where we discuss issues around the emerging age of Aquarius. I'm your host, John Irving. Thank you for joining me. Greetings all. It is October 19th, 2022. Now, if you listen carefully to this, you will notice that I will express some contradictory ideas. And in that sense, it's a bit muddled. But that's the point of this. I want to share my thought process and how I was carrying conflicting beliefs for a very long time without being aware of it. And in that sense, I'm hoping this will be helpful or constructive to others. I have no idea whether other people are also holding such conflicting beliefs, but maybe some people are. Also, I want to say that I've been adding to this a little bit at a time over a number of days, so the audio may vary quite a bit, but it's just because work has only permitted me a certain amount of time every day to work on this. So I apologize for any inconsistency in the audio recording volumes or even the sound of my voice. That's beyond my control. Anyway, on with the show. About a week ago, during my spiritual practice, I was meditating on the Creator, trying to connect with and experience the Creator as much as I possibly could. And so I was focused on this for a while, and something very interesting came back to me, which was, I want you to create your own consciousness. This was quite striking for a variety of reasons. Now let me unpack this a bit, because those 8 words have very profound implications. In terms of spirituality, I've been very influenced by Eastern spiritual philosophy. Many of the spiritual teachers and materials I have been exposed to have their roots mostly in Indian tradition. Indian as in India. And that is mostly because the West doesn't really, or didn't really have much of a spiritual tradition outside of religion, which from my perspective is a very limited set of beliefs in this regard, because it doesn't really take into account a lot of the mystical aspects of spiritual experience. And having had many mystical experiences myself, how could I embrace a philosophy that denied them? Whereas Eastern traditions go into this kind of stuff in a lot of detail. So it's very interesting. All of my exposure to that kind of knowledge and experience creates the impression that we strive to purify ourselves. We strive to attain higher and higher states of consciousness, typically over many lifetimes, and we ultimately arrive at this state of oneness or enlightenment with the Creator. So this process is generally fairly clearly defined. And I had always believed that at some point in my own evolution or experience, I would, in effect, become one with the Creator. And in that, I would find my salvation, my release from the wheel of karma, from pain and suffering, from all this stuff we deal with here in three-dimensional reality. All the karmic bonds and connections and experiences, it's difficult. So part of us wants to free ourselves from all of these bonds. And there's also all of the limitations that go along with three-dimensional reality. I just have this sense that in some other time, place, or way, I have been tremendously unconstrained relative to what I experience in the physical, on Earth at least. And so that I would in effect fall back into the source and be flooded with that consciousness, which would make me whole and make me more directly connected to the source of all things. Almost as if I was returning to the womb. It's like there's a part of me that just wants to go back and be with the Creator and not have to deal with all this crap. So when I get back this answer, I want you to create your own consciousness, I was really taken aback, because that suggests something different than what I was just describing. And my takeaway is that we are supposed to be creators ourselves. Now, I'm not the first person to say that, and I'm not the only person to say that. But this, to me, was a direct experience. It wasn't something I was reading. It wasn't something I was being told. It wasn't someone else's story. It was a direct personal experience that I had. So, if I create my own consciousness, then to some degree, I am by definition separate or distinct from the source, independent. I'm not just part of the amalgam of consciousness, which is the source. I have my own unique consciousness and my own unique expression and self-expression. So that means, if it's true, and I believe it is, that I am on a quest to define myself as a distinct and independent being, which is fairly radically different from what I have understood for many, many years. From that, we can also infer that all of our experiences go towards that aim, and that, therefore, any experience we have, whether it's good or bad from our perspective, is a part of that process. So this is effectively about becoming and being rather than undoing or unbeing. Now, most of us are familiar with the concept of how, for example, a lot of people are dominated by their egos, and that spiritual evolution is about deconstructing and freeing ourselves from the ego, which is the mechanism which separates us from the source. But if our path is to become and to be independent and to be distinct, then we are actually involved in a creative rather than a destructive process. There's this pervasive belief that if we only did what God wanted us to do, all would be well, as opposed to doing what we want to do. And when we defy the Creator, it leads to self-recrimination, guilt, shame, self-judgment, and inevitable but probably deserved punishment. I've said this before here, but the Creator actually never judges us. We judge ourselves. Undoing versus doing. It's a subtle but extremely significant and important distinction. And if doing and being is the aim, then, like I said, any experience that we have adds to that creative process. We can pick and choose and discard what we don't like, but we are always in a process of self-creation and self-expression. Ultimately, presumably, to become powerful beings and creators in our own right. Now, if I was the Creator, I would do the same thing. I wouldn't put beings or souls out into creation and say, oh, go out into creation, do your own thing, and then just come back to me and I'll absorb you. I would be like, no, you're my children. Go and become. I'm getting strong energy here. I'd be like, go. You start out as an infant, very dependent, and then you become a young child, and then a teenager, and then a young adult, and then an adult, and then a mature adult. It's a similar kind of process of gaining independence and strength and a stronger sense of self-identity, except in this case, we probably do it over thousands, if not millions of incarnations. Why would the creator make beings, like I said, that just go out into creation and then eventually come back and just get dissolved back into the same place they started from? So, like I said, the implications of this are really significant and profound because if I accept this, it will radically alter my perspective of being and existing and what my intentions are. So the whole process is about learning and growing and maturing and having all of these experiences, whether we like them or not, good or bad, challenging or easy, whatever, so that we can become powerful, independent beings. And of course, we will still have a relationship with the Creator, because why wouldn't we? But we will have our own consciousness. And it's a consciousness that we are constantly creating. And when you think about it, that's a great responsibility, but it's also an incredible gift. the the opportunity to be and to exist from nothing into something. So we shouldn't judge ourselves too harshly for whatever experience we've had or are having, because this is simply part of the act of creation, that we are works in progress, constantly evolving, constantly creating our own consciousness. The more I thought about this, the more stunned I was by the implications of this realization and awareness. And I'm curious to see if anybody else perceives it in the same way that I do, and to hear what you think about it. And it also kind of explains why things are the way they are on Earth, because what we have is billions of creator beings running around, experimenting with their creative potential and doing all kinds of crazy things that often don't make sense and that are outlandish and ridiculous and unfathomable. But they are learning about creation too. And that's what this is all about, for better or for worse. So, so, so I'm not suggesting that people should just have free reign to be a-holes. That's why we have laws. But apparently we do have a lot of free will. Another thing is, of course, on a higher dimension, if we're coming more from a higher state of consciousness, from our higher self, we would not want to cause harm to other beings. However, Earth is school, and we have a lot of free will around how we can express ourselves and what we can do here. And it's up to us to determine how we exercise that free will. Tying this all back together, here's where my thinking or my beliefs were muddled. I believed that I would eventually achieve a state of enlightenment while simultaneously almost ceasing to exist as an independent being and being absorbed into the consciousness of the Creator, where I would no longer have challenges or conflicts or have to deal with reality like what we're experiencing here on Earth, which is riddled with contradictions and paradoxes. Because I never really understood the purpose of those paradoxes. They seem pointless to me because they're illogical, right? So that's a conflicting idea right there, that I would become enlightened and at the same time almost cease to exist. It doesn't really make sense. Or that I felt that by achieving a state of enlightenment, I would no longer experience things like suffering. See, it's confusing. And so for whatever reason, I had never really thought that through in great detail. I don't know why. It was just an assumption. I made a lot of assumptions. And so now the Creator says to me, I want you to create your own consciousness, which very clearly contradicts at least a portion of what I believed. So if my spiritual task is to create my own consciousness, that means I have to be 100% responsible for both my experience and for what I create for myself. In other words, I'm not just going to achieve a state of enlightenment and then God's going to go like, oh, you don't have to do any more work. You're off the hook. You've graduated. Life is easy now, right? It's kind of like you graduate and then you don't have to do anything. So, in other words, I was thinking that there was an end game, an end to the process. Unfortunately, or fortunately, it seems like there is no end. I have heard over the years some people describe us as gods in training. Now, some people might find that offensive because they would think, well, who are you to say that you're God? I'm not hung up on authoritarianism, so I don't really care. Personally, maybe we are gods in training. And maybe in order to be a god, you have to go through every conceivable experience so that you can be a good god and not a bad one. As I've said before, the Creator isn't going to give tremendous power to beings that are immature and irresponsible. And how do you learn to be mature and responsible? By taking responsibility for your actions and for your creation and for what you do and for your consciousness and for basically everything. And so I had this idea that, like I said, I would get to this point where I just wouldn't have any responsibility anymore and I wouldn't have to do anything. That it would all just be peaches and cream. And I wanted to get there so that I didn't have to deal with all the BS like what we're dealing with here on Earth right now. Because to me, it's infuriating. Because it's so dumb and illogical, it drives me nuts, right? So I'm in the game, but I'm trying to get out of the game, and I don't want to play the game. That's kind of where I'm at, or that's kind of where I've been coming from. Because to me, the game is stupid, and I don't like it. So in a sense, I've been in resistance to the very point of existence itself. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. So I'm curious to hear if other people perceive it the same way that I do, whether other people recognize the significance of this, and anything else you have to say about it. Oh, wait, there's one other thing I want to express. Something that's been coming up for me a lot over the past few weeks is I have these moments where I experience very deep compassion, and it's very moving. and stirring emotionally. But I just feel this compassion coming over me. And I wonder if other people have been experiencing that too. It's extremely beautiful and emotional. It just, I just suddenly find myself in states where I'm just feeling all this compassion. I mean, I hope other people are experiencing that too, because we definitely need to. Also, I want to thank very much Irish Granny Tara. We have collaborated a couple times in the past, which was a lot of fun. And I adore her. She's so smart and so articulate and so dedicated to her craft. And she's relentless, trying to bring truth in a very high caliber kind of way. And so I really respect her intellect and I respect her mission and her passion. And she gave me a great shout out and compliments in an episode that she did recently. I'll put a link to that in the description. And it actually kind of blew my mind because I wasn't really expecting to receive that degree of praise. Um, I was really stunned and taken aback by it, actually. But it means a lot to me coming from her. I was like, it really surprised me. I wasn't expecting that. But I want to thank her for that. And like I said, I'll put a link to that episode. And I would strongly suggest that everybody subscribe to her channel. She puts so much work into it. And she sincerely cares about what she's doing and works at it tirelessly and, like I said, relentlessly. So I really encourage people to tune into her. And again, I thank her very much for the compliment. I feel the same way about her. Also, I'm going to create an Errata page on my website where I will detail minor errors that have occurred. Like, for example, if I got a date wrong or something like that. There aren't many, and they tend to be inconsequential, but I don't want to bore people here with all the details, although I do feel an obligation to document those publicly. I'll put a link to that in the description going forward. Again, I will also put some links in the description so that you can connect with me in various ways. I really appreciate your support and your fantastic comments. There's some really, truly wonderful people who bear with me and listen to my episodes here and elsewhere. Fabulous people. And I look forward to speaking with you again soon.